Hi, dear language learners. How to choose the right language course for fluency, or in other words, how to avoid what I call the language course nightmare. What is this? Actually, the language course nightmare is this situation. You have enrolled for course. Your aim is to get speaking in the new language as quickly as possible. But then you realize, oh my God, this is actually now following a textbook from page 1 to page 90. Every single chapter is going to be passive study of that textbook. And you realize in the course, you're not speaking at all. And the result of that, what I call the language course nightmare, is for a long time, over months, you won't speak, you won't practice speaking. And this is so important, dear language learners, because we all think language courses are obvious. But as you might have come across as well, like myself, there is a huge variety of approaches of language courses. And believe me, invest that time to actually ask these questions that I am going to present in this video to avoid that you actually go into a course that is focusing on passive study rather than fluency. Hi, I'm Dr. Alex. I am a social psychologist and I bring you the fundamental laws of social psychology to have you learn a language with far more efficiency and to have you speak with unshakable confidence. So today I'm actually going to share with you the 3 essential questions that you need to focus on when you speak with a language school or with a language teacher before choosing your language course that you want to enroll in. And this is especially for those of you who are focusing on fluency. So if your aim is to speak as quickly as possible, watch this, and especially the third one that I'm going to present is so important. Also, I think there is this myth out there. I'm actually thinking about doing a whole video on this myth because it's so important to be aware of it. There is a myth about fluency out there that, especially in language courses, I've seen that we think fluency only starts to emerge after years of studying. And my experience after now having activated 4 languages and practicing my 5th is it's not like that. Actually, fluency is not related to the length of study. You can, from a beginner's level, already start to speak and practice engaging in the new language. And that's so important because the more you learn these little phrases like, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, thank you. The more you start to actually feel the language and you start to feel, okay, it's just that sentence I need to memorize. It's not a whole chapter of how I form the present tense in the language. Of course, the grammar is always important, but the grammar, if you've watched my previous videos, will always then come in at a moment when you need it and not as in raison d'être for itself. The grammar should never be existing as the first objective. The grammar should be something that supports your objective of speaking. Okay, let's start. So as I said, 3 questions you should ask before choosing a language course. Number 1 is, do they actually take into account your objectives in general and your objective of fluency? So you should ask, okay, in which way do you build on my individual language learning objective? Do you take into account that I want to be fluent really quickly? That's the first question you need to ask. Do they have this kind of approach of seeing where the student is coming from and helping the student to activate fluency really quickly? That's the first question. Because if the answer is something like, oh no, first of all, we are doing the basics, we're doing like it should be, the basics of grammar, because otherwise you are disoriented, that might be a hint that you will spend upfront a huge amount of time of not speaking. And this is what you want to avoid. This leads me to question number 2, which is, which materials do they use? Because the materials also determine how motivated will you be. So, for example, if you ask them, okay, which materials do you use? And they say, oh yeah, we use this book. and no further explanation, that might be a hint that you will be sitting there studying chapter by chapter from a textbook. And for me, honestly, this is a main factor of motivation, because if I see myself for the next weeks and months just sitting there with a textbook, I know that I will be demotivated. So part of this is also knowing yourself. What do you see yourself with spending time with? Because that type of study, following chapter by chapter, page by page in a textbook, I know myself being very self-aware and honest to myself, I would just be demotivated, and that will not be a fun factor in the language study. If you've watched my previous video on how to design your perfect learning routine, for me, an essential factor is, do I have fun with the language? Do I, for example, going to a language course for me needs to be at least 50% of the time in role plays, in real life situations, in having fun with the other participants, in having funny situations where I start to feel, okay, if I say this, it comes across like that. If I say it in that way, that's actually a better way. Being constantly reminded and corrected by the teacher of something that is not said like that. And this is actually, it's at the center of everything, is the fun factor. Do you have a joyful experience while learning? And that is what absolutely comes across when you ask the question about the materials. So if somebody is responding to you, oh yeah, we use a lot of role plays, we use mise en situation, we use a lot of these repetitions as well, so that you have practice for real life situations. For example, last time in one of my courses, I had the participants go into a simulated restaurant, and I was the kind of quirky, how do you say, the restaurant owner, and I came to the table and said, "Oh my God, we have forgotten here the fourchette and the knife," and so they had to ask, "Oh, there's a problem here. We can't even eat because we don't have the fork and the knife." And real life situations where you have to actually communicate to and if you have watched my previous video on intention, to actually communicate your meaningful situation with an intention of saying something and getting a solution. So in this case, the solution was finding a solution with the restaurant owner to have knife and fork there for eating. This is just a fun example, but it needs to be something where you have a lived experience, a meaningful experience with the language. And in that way, you will memorize and experience the language so much more efficiently, quicker, and in a fun way. So ask for that. What materials do you use? Which techniques do you use? That's the question number 2, essential one. And now, the third one is the important one. For me, it's this kind of, it's not just the course, it's what is around the course. So ask the language school or the language teacher, what do they recommend in the putting together of the learning mix, what I call. So what is accompanying the role play in the lecture? What do they recommend you do outside of the course? What are their recommendations? How you put together the ideal mix of learning methods. So for example, I would always recommend my students, okay, if you have now practiced that role play, watch also that video, so you have a lot of repeated comprehensible input. Take at least 5 minutes a day to do your sentence per day. For that context, we have practiced. So what are the recommendations of that school, how you build your learning routine? So that kind of question also gives you a possibility to feel already if they have that philosophy that every student needs to find their own learning routine. If they haven't got that philosophy, it means there will be a far more rigid and monotonous focus on study, on grammar, and on vocabulary. And again, it's my conviction that focusing only on passive study of grammar and vocabulary will just let you lose the fun. And if the fun is not there, what's the point of learning a language? I know those of you who have been writing as well, if you have an aim of learning really quickly for your work, for example, or for passing that language test, I hear you. In that situation, there might be always that kind of response, oh, in that case, you need to quickly study the grammar. The thing is, the speed will not be determined by how many hours you spend with passive study of grammar. It will not help you. So rather focus on a very fun-based, role-play focused, conversation in context focused course than a passive study course, because you will be more efficient, you will be quicker, trust me. It's also, if you've watched the previous videos on the brain-friendly way of studying, memorization happens via the recognition of patterns that create meaning. This is the social psychology behind it. If you realize, or if you compare two situations, 1 hour of speaking in context in a real life situation and 1 hour spent with a textbook focusing on grammar, in which of these two contexts will your brain memorize more? It will be definitely in the first one, because you will want, with some intention, to communicate something, and your brain will just focus so much more on memorizing in order to get that meaning out there, get that situation resolved. So you will memorize quicker with focusing on real life patterns of meaning rather than focusing on passive study of grammar. Okay, so these are the 3 questions. Now I want to hear from you. What are your experiences with language courses? How did you kind of find your ideal language course that helped you with fluency? Or also, please share, if you are like me, I over the years realized my best and most efficient way of studying is actually being an autodidact. I study best by studying by myself in my own kind of rhythm. I know which time of day I'm most alert. I know what works for me after years of self-awareness on this. How can I practice best with active recall? Let me know as well if you want me to do a video on how I do active recall. And also, what are your experiences with different techniques? Let us share this. As you know, I'm building a community around, individual and brain-friendly ways of learning. So let us exchange experiences, because we can help each other through this wonderful platform of YouTube. And as always, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.